guys, it's Izzy here, and today we're going to be looking at and reviewing all of the books that I read in the month of October. Also, happy Halloween. I didn't say that, but this video is being published on Halloween, so happy Halloween. Some of these books might be spooky, some might not be. But that's just how it is. But let's get into this video. Of these books, we're going to go with the book that I most recently finished to the least recent. So the most recent finish was Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was a reread for me. This is one that is a part of my Taylor Jenkins Reid buddy read along. So we will be reading Carrie Soto is Back next month, or in November. So stay tuned for that. But this one is probably my favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid book. I just love these characters. That's the thing. We had the Rivas siblings, and they are characters that are so lovable, characters that you can root for. In her other historical books, Daisy Jones and Evelyn Hugo, those are characters that are interesting to read from and just to watch that character work happen. But I wouldn't say they're lovable characters. I love reading from them, but I do not love them as people. And with this, I love them as people, and I enjoy reading from them. So that just heightens the reading experience so much. Then the atmosphere, as you can tell, the name of the city is in the title of the book, Malibu. Malibu is such a character in this book, and I think it's the best she's done with using the atmosphere to play a part of the story. Water is also such a really big theme in the story. As you can tell, they're surfers. That brought them together as a family. Water also brought something terrible to their family. And then one of the premises of this book is Malibu is a city that, since even before it was a city, that stretch of land has always been known for fires. And fire is obviously the opposite of water. And I thought that was not really a theme I had picked up on until my reread. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I don't know if Taylor Jenkins Reid did that on purpose, but great. Also, her best writing, it's descriptive, but it's blunt at the same time, which is perfect because it's not going by too fast, it's not going by too long, it just has the perfect tempo, and it's very accessible, and I love that. And then the plot, seeing these siblings, how they are such a strong family unit, but how they are going all through different things and maybe haven't brought that forth to the family. And then we have themes of nepotism and, again, just a family trauma, generational trauma. Such important themes that need to be discussed, and we're seeing it in a historical setting, which is also kind of interesting, where mental health wasn't really a big thing talked about. This book takes place in 1983 for the most part, because we do have some flashbacks to the scenes of their parents back in like the 50s and 60s. But overall, this is a fantastic book, and right now it's the best Taylor Jenkins Reid book. I read a sequel this month for my fantasy pick, and that is Of Blood and Bone by Nora Roberts. This is the sequel in the year, I don't know the name of the Chronicles of the One, but this is the sequel to Year One. Now, this is an adult fantasy, but my main issue was the main character. She is a teenager. We start the story with her being, I think, like 12 years old, and I don't even know how old she was by the end, because that part we will get to during the atmosphere discussion. But our main character's name is Fallon, and she's very much a young adult fantasy protagonist. She isn't Mary Sue. She is not flawed, but everyone else is flawed in the book. And yes, she is the chosen one, but she was so annoying, just so annoying. I really didn't like her. She was very entitled, and as I said, a Mary Sue. But we did see characters from the first book, as this is mainly taking place, I'm going to say roughly 12 years after the first book. And we do get characters from the first book in the series, and I did enjoy getting to see them. And I really liked all of the characters, really, except Fallon. I liked, that's bad, I can't think of his name. The boy, who, I don't know, but Kate's son. I liked him. And then the atmosphere. I love this is set in our world. It's a fantasy in our world. It takes place in the United States, but after the fall of government and anarchy and all of that. But I do think a map was needed because I was having a really hard time following where the characters were going, how long it was taking them to get to places, and then the flow of time just did not go nicely. I don't know where to include that in this, so I'm including an atmosphere. As I said, we started the story with her 12, and by the epilogue scene was kind of so like kind of spicy. So I'm like, I don't think she's supposed to be 15. Like in my head, I think she's supposed to be. I don't think that the author would write that, but I really don't know. So the passage of time was kind of awkward and clunky. The writing was repetitive at times. We have Fallon, who is going to her training because she is the chosen one, so she has to go to training with this wizard in the woods, and so that got repetitive going through the training. And then we have dreams, and her dreams are kind of like prophecies, or maybe something that is happening at that moment. We would read all the dream, and then she would go recount the dream to somebody else, and I'm like, okay, we really just read all of that and now we have to read it again. So very repetitive writing. But the plot of this, so yes, we had that typical chosen one trope, and that's an overdone trope, and it was like any other book with that trope. But I do think just the pandemic aspect of this is very interesting. Well, the pandemic was really the first book, but the aftermath of that and how that pandemic was really not really a sickness. Yes, billions died in a sickness, but people got magical powers, whether they be a witch, an elf, a shapeshifter, all sorts of things, fairies. And I've never really read anything like that, and I do think that's very unique for the plot, but overall the character work was not there. Here's a book that I loved. It was a mood read for me. It's historical fiction, a biblical retelling, and that is The Red Tent by Anita Diamond. This was incredible. I love the idea of having a biblical, like religious retelling, because I do know this is in the Torah and a lot of other religious texts, so that's why I'm like awkward. Do I call it a biblical retelling? We're just going to say it because that's how I heard the story for the first time. So I love taking biblical characters and characters maybe that we got a few sentences about in the Bible, but not a lot, and giving them their own story from what we do know and just adding more to that. The character work in here was fantastic. Seeing Dina we see her from before she was born all the way until her death, and I love stories that do that coming of age and going all through the stages of life with a character. It just really connects you with a character. And I loved getting to see biblical characters like Rachel and Leah and Jacob and Joseph, all these people I have heard about my whole life, just seeing them portrayed differently. The atmosphere, I love this setting. So I don't know where what country this would currently be in. Iraq, maybe. Is it Iraq? I don't know. But maybe there. And then we do go to Egypt. And a lot of times in these mythology retellings, we see Greece, and I have not done well with Greek retellings. So seeing a different setting was really cool, and I really loved this old ancient world setting. And then the writing in here was great. It was just very picturesque. Like, it did a great job at painting the picture in my head. And again, I love the plot of getting an old biblical story and retelling it and getting to hear more about the women in the Bible rather than just the male characters. So if you guys have any other suggestions for books like this one, please let me know in the comments below, because I want to read more. Thriller, so kind of spooky, but not really, because it's not paranormal or anything, but it was thrilling. And that is Miracle Creek by Angie Kim. This is a book that I was going to unhaul. It got saved from the unhaul stack, and I really enjoyed it. So the characters, we see everybody that is involved with this crime, and I think that's such a great way to do a true, this isn't true crime because it's fiction, but for a thriller, you usually get one or two perspectives. You get a ton of perspectives in here, and they are all developed well. I never got confused by who was who and all of that, so that was fantastic. And we do have a diverse cast, and that is always great, of all different ages and races, all kind of things. Then the atmosphere, this was in Northern Virginia, which I do love Nova, but it didn't play a huge part in this. The downfall of this book, though, was the writing. It was just way overwritten. It's not even that long of a book, but if there's parentheses in a book for little minuscule things that we don't need to know. But anyway, if there's parentheses in a book, I skip the parentheses. If you can't get it in the main prose, what is the point of me reading it? I don't read it, which is probably really bad, but The plot was really logical because a lot of times with thrillers, they'll just be really out there, or I predict it really early on, and that was not the case here. I did not predict who was the perpetrator of the crime, and everything just fell together nicely. It all made sense, and I really love that for a thriller. Now we had The Sun King by Nancy Mitford with the introduction by Philip Manzo. This was a great introduction, by the way. But this is how nonfiction should be written. Look how short it is. It was straight to the point, and this is all about Louis XIV of France. He is the longest reigning monarch ever, at least all we know of. And I learned so much about him because most of my knowledge for this time period is in England, in Russia, Italy, and then we are getting into the United States pretty soon. So I didn't know a lot about France, and the Sun King is obviously such an iconic figure in history, so I was really happy to get to learn more about him, and it never bogged me down. I was able to read a chapter or two a day, and that was so nice to learn all about Louis XV. Now we had the polarizing one. I think that's the right word to use. It's a word that I'm trying to add into my vocabulary, and that is Babel by R.F. Kuang. This was a 5-star prediction for me, and it did not live up to that at all. I really liked our main character, I can't even remember his name, Robin. So I really liked him at the start. He was so young and coming of age, and the world was so magical. It felt magical reading this, and that's a feeling that I'm always striving to find. And I was so amazed by that I had finally found it. It felt like reading Harry Potter for the first time. This book was very reminiscent of Harry Potter for me. But as he developed as a character, I hated him by the end. I just thought he snapped and was a completely different character altogether. And that happened with several characters in here. The character work was just not here. And y'all know I'm a character-driven person. So if there's no character work or if it's not done well, I'm not going to like it. But the atmosphere was Oxford in the 1830s and the early Victorian age. So that was really cool to see. I don't know how much is real versus fiction because this is still fantasy, but it is set in our real world. And I don't know a lot about this time period. So I don't know what was fact and what wasn't. So I liked the setting all right. The writing was very dense, and I could only read about 25 pages on a sitting when usually I can do double that. It was just so much to take in. You have footnotes and everything. So I definitely do think the audiobook might be the route to go for Babel. The plot was great and really unique. As I said, there were some elements of like Harry Potter and the Name of the Wind with being in a school, dark academia setting. So there are some hints of other books, but it is really unique. It does cover themes of racism, which we see a lot nowadays, but it also has colonialism, which I haven't really read that much about, and seeing it in a fantasy novel was super interesting to see how the author went about it rather than doing a straight up historical fact novel. So it was very unique there. And lastly, we have another reread, and that is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was my 3rd time reading this book. I did the audiobook, and again, this was in my read-along that I'm doing here on my channel. I loved it, and reading this after the show, I realized how great the book is. The show is all right, it's good, but as an adaptation, I don't think it's that great. But this book, the character work is tremendous. Seeing all these different characters who they're kind of like Miracle Creek, they're all in the same situation, but how they go about it differently. And then the atmosphere is absolutely my love of the 1970s. Seeing a band do what bands do, touring, recording, writing, all about fun stuff. I really, really loved the setting. The writing, again, is so unique that it is told in an interview format and is just dialogue, pretty much just dialogue. There might be like 4% that's prose, but I have never read really anything like that, like when I read this for the first time. And then the plot is straight up what I want out of a plot. If there is a book about a band in the 70s or 60s or 80s, I'm gonna pick it up. It's going to happen. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, comment, rate, and subscribe. And don't forget to ring that notification bell to be notified when all my videos go live. Happy Halloween. And if you made it through this whole video, leave a pumpkin emoji in the comments below. Bye, guys.